Claire Coutinho got her ass handed to her by Ed Miliband in the chamber yesterday. She's the former Energy Secretary and now Shadow Energy Secretary, and she's trying to take credit for the government wins and the deal that they've made this past week. And she's trying to say that it was all set up by the Conservative Party. Now, normally this is going to happen after an election. The previous government can say, yes, we laid all the groundwork, you may have got it over the line, but we did all the hard work and it would have been so much better if we'd carried on doing it. The problem is, though, she didn't do it. She didn't lay any groundwork. They just kept promising they were going to do things, promising they were going to invest in cleaner energy production, but there was never any funding for it. In fact, the only thing that Claire Coutinho is famous for is cancelling a load of meat tax. But then the meat tax didn't exist, so... Anyway, here's Ed Miliband laying out some pretty hard facts about the Conservative Party.
Claire Coutinho. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving me advance sight of his statement, and I do welcome the news today. I am saddened, if not surprised, that he hasn't the grace to acknowledge the work of the previous government in getting to this place. I know that's not the opinion of the many partners who have come together to get this project over the line, and I think it does a huge disservice to his officials who've worked incredibly hard over the last couple of years to get us here. But in fact, as far as I can see, the only positive investments that the Labour Party seem to have made in their first 100 days, the Blackstone AI data centre Northumberland, AR6 and now this, were all negotiated under the Conservatives. What his party has indeed turned into reality is crashing business confidence and overseeing £666 million of assets flee the country from UK-focused equity funds. No wonder they've had to have a change of management. And it was the Energy Secretary Act of 2022, the Energy Security Act, where we set out £1 billion of investment and the business models to support the CCUS market. Our aim was to have 4 industrial clusters by 2030, and I must pay tribute to all those who have worked together on these plans, including BP, Equinor, Eni, and all those involved with HyNet and the East Coast Cluster. I know, for example, the brilliant Mayor of Teesside, Ben Houchin, has been a leading light on this for many years. I noticed the Secretary of State didn't mention him, which again I think is pretty graceless, but I'm sure he would like to welcome his work. I must also mention the former Chancellor, my right honourable friend, the member for Godalming and Ash, who first announced the government support of £20 billion of carbon capture technology last year. That ultimately was the breakthrough step that got us here. He says it wasn't funded, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I'd like to remind him of how much he rests his laurels on a set of draft policy statements for nuclear back in 2009 that didn't have any Treasury funding attached. I had at least £20 billion agreed to be spent at the next spending review, Madam Deputy Speaker. He's a former Treasury spad. He knows what that means. But as always, it's the cheap politics that he reaches for, the ultimate career politician, I'm afraid. And in fact, the funding that we had announced, which ran for 20 years, is around £200 million more per year than what he has set out today. So could he confirm that the projects have not been scaled back, or if so, where the losses have been made? We also have not had any word on the Track 2 clusters, Acorn and Viking, which we were due to make progress on over the summer, which were conspicuously absent from the Secretary of State's statement. There will be many people who will be highly concerned. So could he update the House on those 2 projects in particular? And more widely, the announcement he makes today, rightly in my view, points out the importance of British industry. However, we have seen that both the TUC and the GMB Union have warned repeatedly about his net zero plans and what they will mean for British industry. In fact, in the words of Gary Smith, the leader of the GMB Union, his approach is to export jobs to import virtue. So let's look at what's happened under Labour's watch. Grangemouth, 400 jobs at risk with nearly 3,000 potentially affected. Port Talbot, 3,500 jobs under threat. Scunthorpe, 2,500 potential job losses before Christmas. And the 200,000 jobs which Labour are putting at risk by their plans to ban new oil and gas licences and to make the UK regime the most punitive fiscal regime for the sector anywhere in the world. So when will the Secretary of State publish the impact on jobs of his plans for the North Sea? When will he publish the impact of its effects on investment in clean energy? After all, this carbon capture investment today would not be possible without any Equinor and BP, companies using the stable finances of their oil and gas businesses to invest in clean energy. He talks about the importance of UK decarbonisation to climate change, but will he acknowledge that his plans to target UK production won't mean that we use any less? It will just leave us importing more from abroad, importing more oil and gas from the US and the Middle East, and importing more steel from China, which is still 60% powered by coal, and that both of those things would actually increase global emissions. This would be carbon accounting gone mad. It may leave some in the Green lobby cheering at our reduced emissions, but overall there'd be more carbon in the atmosphere and less jobs here in Britain. Are the Labour Party seriously going to be responsible for the end of steelmaking in the UK, with the added cost of the loss of over 10,000 jobs in our most left-behind communities? He must acknowledge that a better balance has to be found. And to conclude, the Secretary of State has still made no comment, no answer, no apology for promising the British public £300 energy bill savings by 2030 in the general election. Will he finally answer to his backbenchers, to the House, and to all of our constituents today what has happened to that pledge?
Well, can I say to the Right Honourable Lady, I know she's in a difficult position, and it rather showed today. Because let's be honest, the truth is quite painful for her, Madam Deputy Speaker. She failed as Energy Secretary to get carbon capture over the line. Year after year, well, she was only in the job 10 months to be fair, but month after month, she failed to get it over the line because the funding was never secured, because there wasn't the political will from the Chancellor or the Prime Minister. Madam Deputy Speaker, a long line of 14 years of failure. 10 Energy Secretaries. Now, of course, to give her credit, she did try, I'm sure. But there was just dither and delay. Because when we came into office, the funding wasn't accounted for. It hadn't been done as part of a spending review. It just wasn't there. It was just a vague promise. And now, it is, of course, quite difficult for her, and maybe we should have a little sympathy for her, but she has to come to the House today and see what a government actually delivering looks like. Now, let me deal with her questions in turn. First of all, she has the brass neck to say that somehow the problems at Grangemouth and Port Talbot are because of the negligence of this government. Let me tell the House about Grangemouth. Because I came into office with the closure of Grangemouth already announced, was likely to happen, already been announced, and I've had more conversations with my counterpart in the Scottish government than probably 10 years of Tory ministers, because they just weren't interested, Madam Deputy Speaker. And we should be incredibly angry about this. And so what did we do? We funded the Project Willow, which they didn't fund. We added to the growth deal, which they didn't do. And we actually said we're going to have a national wealth fund with the potential to fund Project Willow. None of the things coming from her. She just wasn't interested. She just didn't care. That's the truth about it. And of course it's ideological, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not accidental. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. A bit of honesty from the Honourable Gentleman. I noticed he was very honest about her at a party conference, but a bit of honesty. Right, that's the truth about it. They didn't have an industrial strategy because they don't believe in an industrial strategy. And that is the reality. And let me come to her nonsense, the rest of her nonsense, right? She's interested in Gary Smith. Oh, I'm very pleased she's interested in Gary Smith. This is what Gary Smith said. This is a serious step in the right direction and a welcome investment in jobs and industry after years of neglect under the previous administration. I mean, that is the reality. And as for the other stuff that she says, look, I think she's got a decision to make, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is she began her life, her political career, in the Conservative Environment Network. And now she's ended up backing a net zero sceptic for the Tory leadership. I think it's a little bit sad. Madam Deputy Speaker. I think she should take some time and reflect on that, and on the utter contrast between her failure and this government's delivery.
It's not the first time that Ed Miliband's come head-to-head with Claire Coutinho, and you can see more of this humorous exchange in the video that's on screen now. Thanks for watching, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.